And joining us on the line is Mlondi Mkhize, ANC Youth League spokesperson. We invite back Oliver Dixon, a socio-political analyst, and Bilizo Dedzi, ANC political commissar. Good evening to you, and thanks so much. We'll start with you, Rezo Dedzi, and how we find ourselves in this mess regarding National Treasury and the hope, I guess, of recovering the monies that have been irregular, or rather wasteful expenditure.
Yeah, actually, my understanding here, the state probably shouldn't have spent so much money, because when I was listening how the monies were spent, it went down to me to understand that there was no preparatory stage for this particular giant system, because the preparatory stage, it makes you to have all the tools necessary to start a project. And you classify it also in terms of phases. And you specifically clear that who are going to play a role in those particular stages. Under the first phase, we know that X, Z, Y, G, they are the people who are going to play a role, and we cost their role. Then we are clear that in the first phase, we are about to lose so much in terms of the total amount of the 4.3 billion rands, which was supposed to be spent.
Yeah, so you're saying the lack of continuation, or even from the get-go in assessing the feasibility of a particular project, that it tends to be almost a knee-jerk reaction in trying to deal with government systems when it comes to finances.
Yeah, with me now, what concerns me that it means now that they were dealing with this project in the form of firefighting, not actually clear what they are what is expected of them. Look, if I'm saying under the phase one, you project X and you Y, please push the project. We want to see their timelines allocated to that. Within that timeline, we're expecting you that you would have reached that particular level so that we can now bring in the second phase. Because we're not dealing with a small project here. A project which was paying the state salary more than plus minus 2 million people, workers. It's impossible to say that you are going to do it within a day. Hence, I'm saying that whoever started it was not really preparing.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of combining two issues here in terms of the IFMS project, which has been a dismal failure, and the CIPS that came in to save the government money. What is the rationale if you're saying you're going to cut costs or there's austerity measures, and yet you outsource that function at the bill of 25 million, of which 19 million is said to be recoverable?
Look, preliminary, I think we can say that there is a need for the system that was being conceptualized and supposedly have to have then been designed and implemented. There was a clear need for it. Our public service sector is incredibly big. A lot of people need to get paid. A lot of money needs to go around the system. And when you have it all on one centralized system, it becomes easier to audit, it becomes easier to trace, and it becomes more efficient. So there's a clear need for this thing to happen in the first instance. But I think there was an oversight problem in terms of the awarding of this project to whoever the project manager was in that instance, and whoever the company was that won that sort of procurement. I think the oversight project is that it was clearly, and it's clear now in hindsight, that it was handed over to an incompetent organization, an organization that is unable to deliver on the things that they have promised, that was unable to deliver on the procurement requirements. So if that's the first thing, someone needs to be held accountable. It's clear that the owners and directors of that company needs to be held accountable. The engineers involved in there, they need to be held accountable. But we need to look to Treasury and who needs to be held accountable in Treasury. And I think the spokesperson, the Minister of Finance spokesperson, Maihlomo Tshwete, as we've seen it in the insert earlier, is entirely correct to say we shouldn't prima facie just point fingers and blame people without any findings on these things. Because, I mean, the conceptualization of this project extends as far back as 2005. That's a very long time ago. That's 12 years ago. So we need to then do a proper investigation into at what point did something go wrong. And it looks like at many points something go wrong because, as Ndate just said, how is it that you guys didn't look at the timeline and realize, oh, wait, no, we've spent so much money, we still don't have the product, we still don't have the system, and then continued to spend money, right? That means something irregular was going on and heads need to roll. If those heads are no longer around, hypothetically speaking, if it is indeed Praveen Gordhan and his officers' fault in this instance, some personal liability needs to go to them because $1 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah. And I mean, some of it with the IFMS project was 53 billion spent over 3 years with companies who didn't meet the compliance when it comes to the Public Finance Management Act, certain irregularities, timesheets not being signed, etc. But why the over-reliance, though, on outsourcing certain things? The government does have an ICT, department where you can go and source those kind of skills. Why then outsource to another company that's going to cost the state more money?
I think here people need to understand. We, as a state, we normally import this particular knowledge or technology. It's not with us. There are people who are holding their whole copyright there. They will release it at their own time in the form of licenses. By doing that, it is now critical to, hence I'm saying that if we work these things according to phases, you know that at a particular stage, we will require an imported technology to pass that stage. So who is capable of doing that abroad? And how much is it going to cost us? That is why when they come to a level of 4.3 billion, it means they've known already. Yeah,
sorry. Mlondi Mkhize, ANC Youth League spokesperson, has been holding for a while. Thanks so much for your patience, Mlondi. Just in the interim, while we wait for the process with Scopa and possible even litigation or some form of prosecution, do you think that in the meantime government has the capacity to at least draw from other levers within the government structures to deal with the matter of public finances being streamlined? Mlondi? All right, we have a problem there with his line.
I think it makes no sense to me how the residents of the city of Johannesburg still receive bills monthly that are incorrect. Bills that for water people are paying millions for water they have never used, right? It makes no sense why that's still happening when there's clearly technology available for those things not to happen. So I think the problem here and within our public administration system is not that the money is spent for wrong things. I just think it's spent on wrong organizations that clearly can't deliver, who fail at a compliance level. How are you going to go ahead and award a tender to a company who doesn't comply with the bare minimum? And I think in instances where that happens, those procurement officers, those public administrators need to be gotten rid of. We can't keep those people in public office because those people are going to continue wasting us all this money. But government is clearly capable of still paying salaries every month, of still processing bills and these sort of things. And I think the question is, how do we cut the cost of, because that process is expensive in itself, how do we cut the cost? And how do we do so quickly and efficiently? Okay,
but getting back to the idea, or rather the question, Mlondi, oh wow, I believe we've lost him again. We're having a problem with his line. Number one, in terms of the fees must fall, there was also the question of services being outsourced, which inflates the higher learning institutions' budgets. And if you look in-house and those people are made permanent, you then have more return on investment. So you talk about technologies and skills being imported. If that is perpetuated, then it means that the state becomes a cash cow for consultants and whoever else might have a supposed innovative bells and balloons kind of technology.
Yeah, I think in essence, we speak now as we're speaking, there's this thing called Altec, etc., which is all about technology. Do you understand my point? What it means, our whole idea of this technology is being put in our country by certain people who've got interest in our country. They have released their copyright to be used in South Africa. It means we ourselves, as the South Africans, we don't have that type of technology. That is why, for us as Africans to tap in to what they've got, we've got to train more Africans to enter into that sector, so that we must know that those who hold the copyright, they are able to release themselves, to give it to us.
Yeah.
The system they're entering is so advanced, it cannot be completed by South Africa.
But part of the BE compliance, which will then afford you access to the lucrative government tenders, is that there needs to be skills transfer, not only equity, but also the management, etc., of a particular organization. But in your view, as you are saying, we seem to be just taking lock, stock and barrel, the package of what is being offered by multinationals and trying to apply to our situation.
No, I think we don't have a skill scarcity in South Africa for many of the things that the state needs to administer. So there's clearly no skill scarcity in building roads. There's no skill scarcity in building ICT systems. I promise you right now, there's probably a 16-year-old teenager in the city of Johannesburg right now who can design and code the system that will efficiently give people the correct bills every month. But there's the state's ability to really synchronize and synergize its ability to do business with organizations that aren't big corporations with big organograms, with incredibly big track records, and has a couple of white faces to give it credibility, is incredibly worrying that the state can't do businesses with those things. But on the question of insourcing, and as we've seen, for instance, in the universities, for instance, insourcing has been done because it cut costs. It really does make it cheaper and easier for universities to run themselves. The problem there is that the people who are insourced pay their workers peanuts, inhumane salaries, and that's been the real curse of insourcing. The fact that its efficiency and its efficacy comes at the cost of humanity, quite literally. So to insource that whole thing means that the university now needs to spend a bit more money and a bit more of its own resources to administer that sort of department, that's to say.
Yeah.
So in Wits instance, it's cleaners and hygiene staff. Wits now has to dedicate more staff to administering a department for cleaning and hygiene entirely. And that costs a little bit more money, a little bit more time, and it seems tedious to Edem Abib and his friends too that they have to discuss that in a meeting when you could have just outsourced it and discuss perhaps even patents, as said by Billy earlier. I think that's unfair.
Yeah. But I mean, you have your project management from inception to its completion, that all of those interventions need to be evaluated at a particular point to see whether they're working or not, as opposed to what we're seeing with the wasteful expenditure almost being factored in as part of a value item in a department's budget. We've seen this in this case with Treasury and many others.
Yeah, I'm saying that because of that, I'm saying that if we have a manager who's running a department, you understand my point? Having your plans, having your face cost, you have cost your face already, everything. If I say you come back to me an account, I don't know. I knew exactly at what I'm going to tell you in terms of the progress of the project. But in this instance, we don't get such things. People are doubtful, saying, hey, this one is responsible, that one is responsible. It means there is no planning at all. It was done haphazardly. And that is the people's money. That's my worry.
Do you think those companies that were awarded the tenders irregularly or whose contracts were just perpetually renewed should be investigated, or is it a case that the blame lies squarely with the department responsible?
No, they need to be investigated. Yeah. And they mustn't just be investigated for negligence, they must also be investigated for political interference, because it's clear for you to not be compliant, not being able to deliver, but continue getting these contracts, there must be some political favor skewed towards you. So they need to be investigated for that too. We can call it fraud, we can call it corruption, whatever you want to call it at this stage. But the people, in addition to that sort of investigation, we also need an investigation on these procurement officers and the people who sit on these procurement boards. Because how is it that they continue to award tenders and the processes are irregular? I mean, it's simple, this thing. There's a tender process, follow the process. If you're not following the process, some irregular stuff is going to happen. And they need to give us reasons for why there were extenuating circumstances that allowed them to deviate from the processes as set out in our National Procurement Act.
Yeah, and I mean, is this for you, Retsote, a classic case of public private corruption, because often the focus and the scrutiny is on the public servants themselves, and forgetting that the benefactors of corruption or irregularities in this case would be the private sector.
Yeah, I think largely the people who are going to must account here is the private sector, those who have really tendered to do that particular job. Because really, to me, it does not give me sense that you can't embark on something without having a clear program of it. It means you were somehow allowing these corruption things to happen, because the genuine document or supporting document to what it have done, I think that they should have come up openly to the public to say the integrated financial management system, it's on its way. We are at this phase, which left so many phases to go for us to complete it according to the given time of 2022, something between there.
We had a member of parliament, Mr. Boy, yesterday talking about the same thing, that in fact the atrocity or even the ramifications of this particular systemic culture of not having oversight, of not going through contracts, ensuring that the necessary due diligence is applied, is that the smaller players are then impacted because there's no transparency. There's just favoritism and continuation of the same people benefiting.
I think in many instances where it is foul play or favoritism and that sort of thing and nepotism going on, I think, which we're quite aware of in many instances. I think there's also the case of the people designated for doing the oversight and doing the due diligence in these departments just aren't capable of doing it because they're not qualified. A lot of appointments that have happened in these instances are people who sit there who, for instance, this is a very mundane example, but it's a real example, where a municipal manager in many municipalities would not have the slightest idea on how to read a spreadsheet, would not have the slightest idea on how to read a balance sheet, but he or she is responsible for running an entire administration in a municipality, making sure the books balance, services are delivered, and certain amenities are extended to the people. But those people have no educational background that allows them and capacitates them to do that. That's one mundane example, but it plays itself out throughout our public service. And I think that's also a real problem in addition to nepotism and favoritism.
Yeah. Do you think the judicial inquiry into Treasury would see the time of day?
I think how they've handled the whole thing, they're actually inviting the judiciary to intervene, because it means the way it was handled. The way I saw it from Parliament when they were commenting, there was no plan. People that don't have any, the framework of that particular job it's supposed to be completed. They are quoting them at pieces. It's not clear. Hence, I'm saying that these people are not fair to us, especially our public servant, because the public servant are the one who are communicating as well as the sitter, because the sitter is supposed to play a leading role in terms of this particular IFMS.
Yeah. All right, Reto Dedzi, thanks indeed, ANC political commissar, and Oliver Dixon, social political analyst. So much appreciated. And you at home, we'll take a quick ad break. Do stay with ANN7 Prime.